Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. Today we are playing Qapu Khalqi versus Kestrel Colonial Force, and the scenario is B-Pong. So for today's list, shut up, I'm not being held hostage. Yes, I am voluntarily playing Qapu Khalqi. It is N5, we reevaluate factions on their merits, and QK has an awful lot going for it. And one of the things that QK has going for it in N5, as of just recently, is the reworked Iguana profile. Now, that was the reason that I resolved to try them out, but there's been quite a lot just bubbling away in the back end that you can do with Qapu Khalqi in this edition. And to the extent possible, I'm trying to showcase quite a lot of it and try out quite a lot of it in this list. But the first and most obvious thing is the reworked Iguana. If you haven't seen this thing's profile, with the release of the new miniature, it has received quite a glow up, and it pretty comfortably sits as one of the game's better tags right now. Now, there are some downsides to it, how it plays and how it's structured. The first is that 64 points is real main battle tag points cost. You can get, for pretty similar points cost, some very, very good heavy armor 8 proper tags. And the Iguana is only an armor piercing heavy machine gun, not multi, so its ARO options are a little bit more limited, and it's armor 6. Finally, just in terms of its downsides, it does not have access to a specialist operative remote. There is no way for the Iguana to press a button or interact with mission objectives that require specialists until the operator itself has popped out. That is the end of the list of bad things about the Iguana, because otherwise it is all upside. Starting with the fact that for the first time in the game's entire history, we have a genuinely credible use case for the ejection system. The Iguana now has 3 wounds in its primary form. The operator has 1 wound and has no wound incapacitation. This means that, for practical purposes, this is the game's first effectively 5 wound model. And that is very resilient, and that resiliency is further assisted by the way that the ejection system works. When the transmutation triggers, it also cooks off an Eclipse template which you place over the model, which, unless the Iguana is getting murked in close combat, means that you are almost always going to survive with that operator to then have another turn of play. And the operator is absolutely no slouch. It's ballistic skill 13, it's armor 4 BTS 3, it's very well armed with an AP HMG and 2 light flamethrowers and the ability to deploy mines and an AP heavy pistol +1 burst, which means that it's great at long range or at short range. It's a specialist operative. It retains the repeater that the Iguana has. It retains tactical awareness. It is ultimately a consolation prize that your Iguana died. But with the exception of losing the mine dispenser and some armor and some ballistic skill, you generally have most of the same capability baked into the operator that you did baked into the tag, which really means that, provided you're willing to accept the fact that the baseline tag is armor 6, no visual modifiers, etc., we have just a ton of resiliency. And the fact that this model is a repeater that is almost guaranteed to survive multiple turns, even in the face of heavy firepower, just lets it do things that are otherwise not possible in the game. And we are going to see that in this game today. It's also packing a mine dispenser, which is just really, really good, and is particularly good in a scenario like B-Pong. And so, despite the limited limitations that the Iguana has to deal with in terms of like not being a specialist like other tags, having the remote to kick out, etc., it's a hell of a buy for 64 points. Now, 64 points is not cheap, but Qapu Khalqi have got plenty of ways to still take cool and interesting things and pad out comfortably to 15 orders, thanks to things like high availability warbands, high availability flash pulse remotes, etc. And so we've got plenty of other stuff going on in this list, with a couple of specific objectives that I wanted to fulfill in terms of what I wanted the list to be able to do. I wanted it to be able to do both smoke shooting with an MSV2 and regular shooting through white noise, so I would always have the ability to stack negative modifiers on my opponent's ARO pieces in my active turn. I wanted it to have good network projection in addition to the mine dispenser from the Iguana, because those things combo very nicely. And I wanted it to have a very credible hacking network to back up the fact that it's firing out repeaters and has a repeater tag. And I think we've pretty much accomplished all of those. Now, there are a few flex points that we can sort of note as we go through, and especially anything that costs about 22 points is something that you can flex in and out in Qapu Khalqi. There are a lot of things that are like 21 to 23 points that are fairly appealing in faction. And so, for example, even though this list does not have a Corsan parachutist deployment zone, you could very easily fit one in by cutting any of the equivalently costed pieces. So from top to bottom after the Iguana, we have Layla Sharif. Now she's going to be duoed with the Iguana this game, but she could also join potentially this fire team here of the Azrael, Sekban, and Hafsa. She is important mostly because she's a Sixth Sense hacker, but also being a killer hacker with a firewall and carbonite means that she's going to cover bases. We only have one other hacker capable of Carbonite and Oblivion and Spotlight. We've got Lashmi in Group 2, and so just having one extra thing that can do AROs against attackable heavy infantry, Layla does that and is Sixth Sense and is a KHD. We've then got, as noted, a fire team of the Azrael Ballistic Skill Attack +1 Burst Flareback, a Sekban Doctor, and a Hafsa. Now you could cut this Sekban and just plop Layla into this fire team and it would still have fire team bonuses. This fire team is considered to have 2 Sekbans in it because the Hafsa counts as that, but if you dropped Layla in, the fire team would be considered to have 2 Ghulams in because Layla counts as a Ghulam and so does the Hafsa. In either case, what you want is for this Azrael to get +1 special die, because that puts it up to 4 dice when it's rolling with the Flareback. Now, the reason why, normally, particularly in vanilla Hack Islam, if I'm taking an Azrael, I would kind of favor the HMG. It is cheaper, it's 4 points cheaper, which is pretty noticeable, but it also just natively has burst 4, which means that it's winning face-to-face rolls more. In this list, because we can get the fire team bonuses, I'm more comfortable taking the Flareback, but it is very worth noting that when you are buying the Azrael Flareback, you are not buying a Flareback +1 burst, you are buying an Azrael with Ballistic Skill Attack +1 burst. And when combined with all of the other stuff that the Azrael does with its guns, what you actually have here for the extra 4 points you're paying is secretly a very credible close assault piece in addition to being a long-range dangerous gunfighter that can do things like use white noise to shoot enemy MSV models. Because this Azrael on all of its guns has +1 burst, extra damage, and continuous damage, which means that you're not just using the Flareback, you have what is basically a dangerous burst 2 flamethrower forked with a burst 3 +1 special die, +1 damage, AP continuous heavy pistol. You can kill a tag in one go at short range with a weapon like this, which means that if I need this unit to move forward and launch a close assault, I've got NCO from the Sekban helping the Azrael move forward, and then the Azrael can be the one that comes around the corner and knocks shit down. It's very appealing, although in this game, mostly what it would be is an ARO piece, which it also is a little bit better at thanks to having the Flareback. Now, from there, we have a Hoa Killer Hacker. This guy is present because I wanted more than one KHD, and your options are a little bit limited in QK. You could get something like a Druze duo into this list, but with the Iguana and a linked picture from Lashmi, I didn't really feel like I needed more linked pictures. And the Hawa is very nice in B-Pong just because it lets you start 4 inches away from one of the antennas that you want to control during the course of the game, move forward, secure it with a Cybermine, and then just be on that antenna. And it would pay dividends in this particular case. But again, this is a 22-point piece. There are tons and tons of 21 to 23-point pieces in Kukai. This is another thing you could cut if you wanted to. We then have the first of 2 Yanyans, 6-point profile, has the heavy pistol, very nice. A Shakush pilot. Now, the main virtue of the Shakush pilot is that it is 9 points and a specialist. You could easily, if you had just a few more points, right? For example, if the Azrael was a HMG profile, if you trimmed points anywhere else, this Shakush pilot I would actually consider have be something like Abashi Bazook, which are very interesting, particularly with the border skirmishes rule, for example. But in this case, I had 9 points spare, and being able to dodge with the Iguana on 14s when the Iguana has a repeater, it is a higher utility dodge because you move up to like 8.5 inches away from an enemy hacker or an enemy hackable piece, and then you dodge into zone of control and get your killer hacking on. It's very useful for the Iguana to be able to dodge on higher numbers. 2 Fanus remotes, deployment zone, hacking network, repeater, cheap orders. Finally, in Combat Group 2, we have a 3-person Harry's team of a Janbazan HMG, Lashmi, and a Hafsa. This Hafsa is my lieutenant, but this is QK. Any Silhouette 2 model that isn't mine laying or rolling for booty could feasibly be the LT, and in fact for much of this game my opponent would assume that this Hafsa, which was pretending to be a Ghulam hacker, would be my lieutenant. Now, this fire team can move out, it will in fact during this game, but the main purpose that this fire team is going to serve is to be 2 things. If it can, it's going to try and take attacks into the enemy deployment zone through smoke provided by the Yarn Yarns. Burst 5 with smoke penalties makes the Janbazan very good at winning face-to-face rolls. If it goes down, it's got regeneration or I can speedball it. But if there is nothing for the Janbazan to do, which is going to be the case plenty of the time, I can outlet orders in this group by having Latchme just fire off pitches, fire off pitches, fire off pitches, and then reload. meaning that the orders in this group are never wasted. And when we have the iguana firing off shock mines and Lashme firing off pitches, we can build material-heavy defensive networks that take lots of orders for my opponent to unpick, but don't actually risk any of my troops' lives. We then have a Hafsa. Interestingly, that means that this fire team is getting bonuses because there are two Odalisks in it. Then another Yan Yan and a Camille. You absolutely need baggage in this list. The Iguana desperately wants baggage. Lashme desperately wants baggage. The Camille is very, very important. So I was quite happy with this list. I don't think there's anything I would necessarily change on the second playthrough other than to potentially tinker with it based on mission. It has a ton of specialists, a ton of different capabilities that it can do. And I have basically always, but especially in N5, really enjoyed those material-centric defensive networks that you can build. And the list is pretty good at defending itself, like just well enough to buy time to then establish that in your first turn. So I like this list a lot. I can recommend it. Let's have a look at the Kestrel list it would be playing against. Now, this list bears a little bit of talking about for a couple of reasons. The first, and we will go through everything, is that it's just an absolute showcase of some of the best of the capability that Kestrel Colonial Force has to offer. If you handed me this list in 2 days' time and said, hey Rob, here is the list that won Gen Con, I would read through this and go, oh yeah, that 100% checks out. This is Kestrel filled top to bottom. This is very cleanly put together. I like this list a lot. And I do like this list a lot. The other reason that it kind of bears mentioning is that this list was written by one of the newest players in my community. His name is Cameron. He has not featured on this channel yet. I've had the pleasure of having a couple of games against him. And do you ever meet those players where you play against them and they're new and you come away from the game going, holy shit, this kid's going to be a weapon in like a month? Cameron is one of those guys. And this list is testament to that. He had no input to this list. No one came and gave him a hand with it. He came about this all by himself from first principles. And the only point of critique I can possibly think of that I might levy against this list is that this name here, Cameron, is kind of weak. You can do better. This is something to work on. We're looking for puns, innuendos, or clever references, not just some kind of vague description. Anyway, from top to bottom, what we have is two combat groups, both of which are trying to build relatively large order counts and provide good outlets for those order counts. In the first combat group, we firstly have a duo, and these two pieces would be Cameron's reserve drops. The fact that you can just slam down by Pandra and a Griffin, this is a Kestrel Fire Team duo. It has duo bonuses, which means that Griffin is firing 2+1 dice. You can put them down wherever you need, whether it's you need the Griffin as an ARO piece, an active turn piece, you think you're going to need by Pandra to be a specialist or to reconstitute something. This is just a fantastic use of the Strategos' reserve drop. It is a complete fire team and it's very effective for the points cost. We then have a 3-person, this is a core technically, of a Crux Knight, a Fennec Triangulated Fire, and a Fennec Forward Observer. One of the weaknesses I have noted in my own Kestrel Colonial Force lists is that I always just seem to kind of end up cutting this Forward Observer, and I shouldn't. For 13 points, it's some of the highest combination of utility in the game. It has a sensor, it is a specialist, it has disco balls, it is contributing to link team bonuses. If we had just 2 more points, I would seriously consider exchanging this Triangulated Fire Mine Layer Fennec for a hacker, just so that there was a hacker in the list that isn't a KHD. But frankly, even then, having the Thunderbolt +1 burst with link team bonuses combines nicely with the Crux Knight if you need that longer range shot, and Mine Layer is just really good in terms of buying yourself that first turn. In terms of other things that buy that first turn, we have the first of 2 Jackal Infiltration Mine Layers. It's going to combine with the Yamabushi. They'll be deployed near one another, so it's not completely clear which one is the Yamabushi and which one is the mine, although in this case it would be relatively easy for me to tell based on the distances each was deployed in. But there is just not, there's like no way to understate how useful these 11-point half an SWC Jackals are to Kestrel. They are an incredibly cheap mine layer. They have a boarding shotgun and a boarding pistol, which means it always tends to cost to unpick them. And they can spend their irregular order and any spare orders you have in the group firing off this EM grenade launcher from the midfield. I am kind of the opinion that these guys are the Libertos of N5, just in terms of how much they add to a list and how much they give you the opportunity to just randomly win a game. There were so many games in N3 and even in N4 where some random Libertos would just overperform massively relative to an 8-point miniature and blow a game out. And the Jackal only has to just roll a 2, 3, 4, or 5 on that EM grenade launcher and brick something that your opponent desperately did not want bricked to reach that massive overperformance threshold. And because there are 2 jackals, and anytime there are any spare orders, they can just spend those orders, usually like once a game, or at worst once every 2 games. One of these jackals is going to colossally overperform and put you in a position where it's just really straightforward. Like you have a massive advantage. And they're an incredible defensive insulation. Genuinely one of the best troopers in the game. Only like Hack Islam comes even close to irregulars of this quality. Now, we've then got, obviously, the Yamabushi. I'm a big fan of Yamabushis. They are excellent. It's always nice to have as much close combat in a list as you can fit, and between the Crux Knight and the Yamabushi, we are well suited to killing things in melee. A Banshee KHD. This is the only killer hacker in the list, and the only hacker in the list, period. Banshees are very, very good. They're very attractively costed. We don't really need to extol their virtues too much. And especially having a killer hacker that can arrive on its own terms and go and make a KHD run is highly valuable, especially for Pan-Oceania, especially for this kind of a Kestrel list, which has multiple hackable units. Just a very high utility piece, in addition to being a jet propulsion, MSV1, pulse up +1 burst submachine gun profile, meaning it is lethal even if it has no killer hacking to do. Playing against Ariadna, no problem, it's even good in that matchup. Now, finally, a Fugazi drone bot rounds this combat group out. And with the Banshee off the field, we're going to, most of the time, beginning of the game, we're going to have 7 regular, 1 irregular, and 1 tactical awareness order, which is ample to do some work. But in the event that there's not a lot for this fire team to, this combat group rather, to do, we've always got the Jackal as an outlet for any spare orders that we have, with a high chance of solid payoff if we put enough orders through it. In a very similar vein, in Combat Group 2, just to start with, firstly we have the Magistrate Lieutenant and 2 Jackals. 4 regular orders for 3 combat group slots. They are going to be fueling the other pieces in this combat group, which are, hey look, it's our second Jackal. There, once again, is your outlet for any spare orders in this combat group, and a Hetkari shooter duoed with a Pathfinder drone bot. This is one of those duos that it does not have linked team bonuses, and it doesn't need it. It is just incredibly high utility. The Pathfinder does so much in this edition, where deactivators for the first time in Infinity's entire history are genuinely useful. And it's a tactical awareness order to caddy the Hektari around, and it's a specialist, and so it brings all of those things. It supports the Hetkari, it is a specialist for the Hetkari, and the Hetkari is a Hetkari. I don't really need to explain that it is one of the best guns in the entire game. The combination of high ballistic skill and marksmanship, and ballistic skill attack -3, and natively good stats, frankly means that the closest thing it has to a downside is that it is only firing off armor-piercing damage 7 rounds, which, despite nominally being a threat to kind of everything, can begin to stall out against very high armor targets, or just like low armor targets in cover that get reasonably lucky. That is the only downside of the Hetkari, but it is thoroughly acknowledged as one of the best active turn guns in the game. And so this is a list that just has loads of firepower, good specialists, visibility control, anti-hacking options, tons of orders, like so many orders, and great outlets for those orders. This is an outstanding Kestrel list. The only thing that it needs is a slightly better name. So, beginning the game, Cameron is going to crit the LT roll and pick deployment side. He will be deploying on the right side of the table from the perspective of these photographs, and I will be choosing to go first. I don't really want to do that, because B-Pong is a violent scenario to have to play from first player position, but I have built my list with the intention of being able to, if it gets the first turn or any turn at all to play, build a very powerful defensive network, and so, look, we may as well test that. Also, frankly, I know that Kestrel is, the Whip 13 means that Kestrel is either packing a counterintelligence lieutenant or a Tikbalang lieutenant, and I don't want to deal with either of those without at least having had a chance to get some movement up on the field and some deployables placed. So first turn is what we're doing. Just some very quick notes about this scenario and this table. There is a 4-inch exclusion zone if you're familiar with B-Pong. We are also, in this case, we have the 2 antennas that you're trying to control, top and bottom of the screen here. Those we're just using tokens for, so they don't have any dimensions. However, quite intentionally, for the central console, the Pong itself, we are using a 3-dimensional thing. It is the size of a Silhouette 3. That's our choice. If you use a 3-dimensional thing to represent a scenario element, it is considered to have 3 dimensions and it provides cover. That is like really important, I think, in B-Pong B-Pong to give the first player a chance in hell. And so just to note, you will see me at some point during the game using it to either take cover behind or block line of sight. That is because this particular one we are using a three-dimensional piece for. Now, from top to bottom, we have deployed here, just inside, just touching the exclusion zone, we have our Hawa hacker. It is hoping on the first turn just to move forward and get onto this objective. We then have Lashmi's mine over here, Lashmi herself and the Janbazan and a Hafsa pretending to be a Janbazan Janbazan hacker are all deployed on this rooftop and just behind. To enable reloads, we've got the baggage bot just over here. We then have, and this was the reserve drop, we have the iguana deployed fairly aggressively centrally. Now there is a lot of tall terrain in the midfield on this table. This is a pretty close table. I actually would have been kind of happier with more open terrain. I have more long range guns than my opponent does in this case. Not by a lot, but I have a comparable amount of long range firepower. I would actually have been quite happy with the ability to do things like bracket my opponent's DZ on the first turn. Not going to be an option, but it does mean I can deploy the iguana fairly aggressively. Similarly aggressively, we have both Yarn-Yarns deployed just like on the starting line here. I can do that safely in this case because there is no way for my opponent to pin them down, so pros and cons of having this tall midfield. Layla Sharif is hanging out back here, but she will be duoed with the iguana. And then over here we have the other Haris team. We have the first of two repeater bots here, the other one is just hanging out somewhere. But the Hafsa is at ground level here, the Sekban is at ground level here, and prone for now but able to stand using the NCO order if I want is the Azrael here. Now, this is the first of a couple of mistakes that I will make this game. This is just kind of sloppy deployment. I deployed the repeater first, thinking about where my deployment zone, I want my deployment zone repeaters to have good coverage. I deployed it, then I deployed other things, and I didn't reevaluate after that. The reason why this is a mistake is that it is really dumb for the Sekban not to be sitting here. Over the course of this game, we are at some point going to see the Azrael drop unconscious, and because the Sekban is at ground level, it's going to have to come all the way around, get up to this door, come up. It's going to take so many orders and will have other negative effects. Just put your doctor next to the piece it's going to be doctoring. Very simple mistake. It's the kind of thing that you will occasionally, and I will occasionally make a mistake like that when I am playing a list or even a faction for the very first time. Something I would definitely change in future, and the first of a couple of mistakes we will make this game that I will call out as I make them is, yeah, just put the doctor next to the Azrael. Now, on Cameron's side, from top to bottom, up here on this rooftop, we have the Hetkari shooter and its Pathfinder drone bot. They can get down. These doorways here allow access to the rooftops and vice versa, but they will spend most of the game moving across this bridge, taking face-to-face rolls and then pulling back, giving the Hetkari a fairly commanding view of the battlefield down off of this rooftop, down these angles here and here. On this rooftop here, infiltrating, we have a Jackal and its mine. The Jackal is prone, but to note there is access up through this building through the doorway, which the Jackal is guarding the entrance against. Over here, we have the fire team consisting of the Crux Knight. It's behind sort of these buildings, and this sign. We have the fire team consisting of the two Fennec Fusiliers and the Crux Knight. The Fennec Fusiliers mine is on this corner here. We've then got the other Jackal. It's going to be deployed near two camouflage markers. You can see one here up against this sign here and one up against this sign. One of those, however, is clearly the Yamabushi. The reason that you can tell is the Yamabushi's forward deployment is limited. This is the only camouflage marker that is inside 16 but not inside 20. This camouflage marker, while not being quite up against the exclusion zone, is pretty close. It can't be a Yamabushi. One of the things that Cameron could have done in this particular case is just pull this mine back a little bit. It wouldn't have had a huge effect on how effective it could be during the game, but it would have caused me to have to at least consider that either of these might have been the Yamabushi. Very mild, right? Not something you always want to do, because if there is just a good location for the mine, just take the good location for the mine, but a very minor optimization you can sometimes make. Now, here we have the Fugazi drone bot, and then on this building we have much of the rest of Cameron's strengths. At ground level and on the rooftop, we have the first of two Jackals, the Magistrate, and then the Jackal Panzerfaust. So the Jackal Panzerfaust is actually positioned to be able to see anything walking across this bridge. Even on this rooftop here, it's going to be fairly annoyingly able to take AROs. The other Jackal, being at ground level, is watching up this angle here with its light rocket launcher. The Magistrate is hanging out in a little nook behind an air conditioning unit and the building, and all of these are basically set up to have mutually covering lanes of fire, because in the first game that I played against Cameron, I may have used not one but two Corsans with Parachutist Deployment Zone, and he is not being taken in by the same trick twice. He is set up to have fairly thorough bracketing of all of his table edges, at least in the locations that might be dangerous. There's not really a way, if I had access to a Corsan in this list, that I'd be able to bring it on without taking a face-to-face roll of some description. Then finally, on this rooftop, the reserve drops we have by Pandra and the Griffin. They've deployed over here, able to potentially come around and engage the Azrael, or up and over this bridge, moving towards the center of the field. Just nicely positioned to take sweeping shots onto this rooftop, down here, making the best of the long fire angles, although for now the Griffin is prone very reasonably. There is not particularly any reason in this case for Cameron to want to put things up on ARO. He has read my deployment, he has gone, wow, you have a lot of guns, and so very sensibly he has fallen back to a null deployment behind all of his mine layers and camouflage markers, etc., and I think that's eminently sensible. And in fact, it would hugely constrain my first turn. As I begin my first turn, I am faced with the fact that there is not really anything for me to shoot, and I am not configured in a way where I can really make a close assault. Anything that I might aggressively push forward with is probably going to hit the jackals first. And while I'm very close to potentially being able to get into the cookie jar with certain offensive teams, I am not confident in being able to do it like cleanly with the orders that I have. For example, this fire team here, if I was to spend all of the orders on it, I could feasibly move out through this open ground here, but I know this Yamabushi with the Panzerfaust. It is going to take me multiple orders to stop and deal with it, even if like the best case scenario is that I somehow come up and discover shoot it. More likely I would have to move through the open and at some point tempt a Panzerfaust shot, which will strip at probably special die from this fire team. And so even if I get all across that space and it doesn't take me too many orders to kill the Yamabushi, I would still come around this corner, be tempting dodge arrows from the things on the rooftop, and I would still have to get up through this jackal before I could get around and deal with to actually get the kill on the lieutenant to hopefully do something decisive. That is all just a bridge too far. I don't think I can do that with the 9 potential orders that I would have with that team after accounting for the NCO order. And that's kind of the story of this turn. Cameron's defense is very tightly put together. It is a good null defense deployed in a way and with a read against the kind of attacks I was going to be launching. So we fall back on plan B. This is B-Pong. We are going to play the scenario and build a defense using our materiel to make the scenario as favorable for me as I can. And that's going to involve a few lines of effort. The Yan-Yans are going to move forward. This one, by the way, this one here is the one in Group 1. It has rolled a multi-rifle, and very interestingly, this one in Group 2 has rolled +4 armor, which is going to matter. Now, the Yan-Yan with a multi-rifle, over the course of this turn will move up and around. It will come into this building, and just with like the few spare orders that it has, it will jump onto the far side of this objective, go prone, and I will actually have one spare order this round, which will put it into suppressive fire, where it will stay for the entirety of the game. It isn't a specialist, so it can't press the button, but it absolutely can control it, and that will be its job for literally the entire game. It will never move. The Yan-Yan that is in Combat Group 2 and rolled up +4 armor will be the sole offensive element this game. It will jet up and around, it will move up through this space here, it will get to this doorway, and then it will come up this doorway to engage this jackal. It will at that point basically get lucky, although I will note that an Armor 5 model passing a hit from a boarding pistol or even a boarding shotgun and a save from the mine is possible, but the main thing is that it puts this jackal down with its chain rifle and does not die. That's excellent. It will then come back down to the ground level where it will hang out, although it is not quite able to get onto this objective safely. I am not able to push this objective far enough forward this turn to control it, and I'm not willing to sacrifice a model at this stage. I am able to move the objective forward just a little bit when I activate this console up here on this building, on this rooftop, but there is nowhere that the Yan-Yan will be able to go that is in any way safe, and so no scoring of the central B-Pong for me this round. The couple of remaining orders, and I have 2 remaining orders after all of that is done with the Yan-Yan in Group 2. I have no shots to take with the Janbazan, but Lashmi can easily fire off some pitches, and she's going to fire off pitches in and around this central area. She will land both of them. She has reasonable accuracy with her pitches this game. They'll kind of fall apart later in the game, but for now she's going to land 2 of them, and we're going to start building that material hellscape with our deployable equipment, with our mine dispensers and with our repeaters. Now, Combat Group 1 has just a couple of things that it will be doing. Obviously, the first is that the Yan Yan came around and got onto this objective. The other is that 2 orders are going to be spent on this Hawa. It's going to move forward and place a mine, and then move forward and activate this console. The main reason I'm doing all of that is that I want it to drop out of camouflage. I want to be controlling that console. Now, you don't get points for controlling 2 consoles in B-Pong. You only get 1 point per round for controlling at least one. But if I have one model on each console, and both of them are a little bit tricky to try and deal with, I have the best possible chance of one of them surviving the end of Cameron's first turn and scoring me that all-important point. You need to scrape for every point you can going first in B-Pong, because it is just so difficult, particularly at the end of the game, to score those end-of-game scoring points. Now, with the Yan Yan having done its business, and the Hawa having done its business, all of the rest of the orders are spent on movement, shooting mine dispensers, and reloading with the Iguana. It's not going to try and make any face-to-face rolls this game. It is just going to go brrr and throw out mines everywhere. And this is something that I'm getting better at as I play more with pieces like this. Pieces like the Maghreb Guard, had a game recently with the Gator, the Nomad Gator. And one of the things that I'm increasingly learning as I get a chance to play with mine dispenser pieces is how to build a minefield that is not easily triggered. What you don't want to do, not particularly, is cluster all of your mines in one space, even if that's the space you're trying to defend. Because if you do that, one single model can just salute the flag and run through them all and die, but it can be a disposable piece like an 11-point Jackal, and all of those orders that you spent in your first turn building that minefield are wasted. Instead, you want to build a minefield that is as deep as possible so that it is very, very difficult to disarm or shoot or destroy any given one mine, or like 2 mines or 3 mines. It's very difficult to deal with it in an order effective way. And so in that, basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to get mines everywhere across the table this turn, and we're going to end up with mines somewhere like everywhere that an X marks the spot. Like all of these locations, we are going to try and put mines down so that we have, and then we have the cyber mine that has been laid by the Hawa. All of these locations, we have all of these different mines, and we can see from that kind of layout that it's just not possible for one single model to easily disarm even more than like maybe 1 or 2 of them per order. And that's basically going to be the entire first turn. And as we flick over to the beginning of Cameron's first turn, we can see the challenge that that presents. Now, he has a ton of orders at his disposal here. And that is one thing that he absolutely can do, is he can just spend lots and lots of orders unpicking everything that I have done here. But the presence of repeaters is a challenge. In particular, we've got a repeater that is right in this nook here, and we have a second repeater that is on this side of this building, and neither of those are particularly easy to deal with in an order effective way. The best model to have dealt with them would have been this Jackal on the rooftop, since it is unhackable, but it is dead, and so I'm thoroughly dug in with my material on this particular turn. To deal with that, he's going to bring on the Banshee. It's going to arrive over here, and it is going to spend like a fair few orders trying to deal with just this repeater here. It will take something like 3 orders, one for it to arrive, and then 2 or 3 orders for it to shoot, because the repeater is in cover. The Banshee is firing at kind of mediocre range, doesn't want to get within 8 inches for obvious reasons, but it does eventually put that repeater down. That opens up a path then for the Hetkari and the Pathfinder to move out, and the Pathfinder just takes the risk, right? It just moves into zone of control of this repeater here and fires up the deactivator. I'm going to respawn with both Carbonite and Oblivion. I'm going to fail both of those, but in the event that either had gotten through, Cam has Speedball available and could have just recovered the Pathfinder, or could theoretically have just left it there. Even in the worst case scenario where it is completely bricked, isolated, and immobilized, it can still reset on ones. It has 2 orders to do so. He can always recover it next turn. Like, there are a number of options, and in any case, it would have done its job, which is to get the Hetkari forward. Now, this is going to have to be done in a relatively order inefficient way, because to begin with, there have to be a lot of prone movements here. Because I have a standing Azrael at the end of my last turn, it's got a Feuerback. The Feuerback does have clear visibility onto this bridge. The Hektari and the Pathfinder both have to move very carefully and prone to set a line of fire to begin with, so that the Pathfinder can clear this repeater. So with both of these repeaters cleared, the first by the Banshee, the second by the Pathfinder, then the Hetkari can stand up and move forward. Now it has to stay kind of in the middle of this bridge. It's never going to engage the Yarn Yarn, because to do so would have to lean out, and I think at this point we have like 3 mines that would detonate on it if it was to do that. And it is armor 5, it is quite durable, but Cameron is quite sensibly not willing to risk that, not for a Yarn Yarn. But what the Hetkari will be doing is teeing off on the Azrael. After 2 face-to-face rolls, and this is one of those face-to-face rolls that's kind of hair-raising for both players. For me, because the Hetkari massively outperforms the Azrael, but for Cam, because all the Azrael has to do is get lucky once with a double action armor-piercing round, and you absolutely can, thanks to continuous damage and extra damage and like etc., lose that Hetkari. But the Hetkari does what we would expect it to do in most cases, and puts the Azrael unconscious. Now, after all of that, even with the high order count in that team, there aren't a ton of orders left. So the Hetkari and the Pathfinder, even though they would like to close in on and deal with this Hawa, they're not quite able to. What they are able to do is have the Pathfinder just do a little bit more movement, censor out and remove this Cybermine, which was really a precondition of the Hetkari moving in and engaging, but it all takes just long enough that there isn't a possibility of the Hetkari going in and trying to secure a kill. However, the Banshee still has orders spare. Not a lot of orders. There's been a little bit of movement. This Yamabushi has moved around, tried to get a little bit clever, trying to deal with the Yan Yan in here. Isn't quite able to make it. Is end up going to die. But after all of those, we still have some orders spare because of how many orders this list has. And so the Banshee is going to make, just with its last couple of orders, a run on the Hawa, but it is going to be rebuffed. This is another one of those like face-to-face rolls. 2 killer hackers meeting in effectively open field. I actually win a face-to-face roll, but don't inflict a wound on the Banshee. Banshee ties the next one and just pulls back and goes, you know what, fine, I don't get you this turn. Overall, despite the fact that Cam was able to unpick quite a lot of what I did and put an expensive heavy infantry down, I'm pretty happy with that as a first turn. Getting through the first round in B-Pong, having your only losses be either material that you have reloaded or a dude that you can recover with a doctor or a speedball, and have scored a point, right? At the end of the first round, I've got 1 point. Cam has not been able to get onto any of the objectives or onto the B-Pong. That's a really big deal. As noted, this is a hard scenario to win as first player, and that 1 point lead, if I can just keep pulling those little incremental leads, you have to play like that to win B-Pong from the first position. Now, the only other things of note that happened were that both Jackals, so the one remaining Jackal tried to fire off an EM grenade with 1 spare order, which the Iguana did successfully dodge, which is why it's moved slightly, and we proceed into my second round. Now, I'm going to do my level best here to try and throw the game, which is to say this is going to be a kind of ineffectual turn, but bear with me. The successful stuff first. I am able to reconstitute the Azrael. We're going to have the Sekban, which previously moved over to this position behind the sign. It will come up and around, get to this doorway, and come up and around and recover the Azrael. It's a Whip 17 Doctor, easy success, lovely. That all takes 1 order, 2 orders, 3 orders to recover the Azrael, and then a command token. Now the command token, fine, had to spend that to reform the link, but 3 orders compared to like literally just the NCO order, if I had had the Sekban in this position where the Fanus currently is, that is really just, that's why we should have had the Sekban in this position next to the Azrael. Just deploy your Doctor where it can doctor things, it's not too difficult. Still, by the end of the round, the Azrael is conscious again and back in a link, so thumbs up there. The other reasonably successful thing, although it is very order intensive, is on the sort of like my left flank up here, this fire team is going to move out. I don't really want to do that. I envisage this team as being more of a static presence, but there are a couple of things at play here. The first is that I want every point I can possibly get, and my classifieds suck. I need a model with a visor or a sensor to get near the HVT. It's up here behind this crate, and there is one of those in my entire list, the Janbazan. The other thing that I can potentially do is capture the HVT, which needs a veteran, elite, or chain of command, which I do have a fair few of, but again, it's all the way up here, and the option I've really got is Lash Me to go and do it. And so this static fire team, or at least what I intended to be the static fire team, starts making a trek overland. The Hafsa, who I will remind you is my lieutenant, but pretending presently to be a Janbazan hacker, and Lashmi are going to move up and around the side of the building, while the Janbazan HMG gets up onto the roof and takes some shots over here. We're going to get some smoke from the Yan Yan. It's going to lay smoke down here, and then suppressive like HMG gunfire downtown into this, which remember the The Panzerfaust armed jackal has a line up onto this bridge and up onto this roof. We're going to take shots through smoke, which will put that jackal down, which I'll take it, any attritional advantage is good. Lashmi is going to flub one of her pitcher shots before finally landing one, getting a pitcher down next to the Banshee KHD, at which point it will take, I think, 3 or 4 orders for Layla Sharif to put the Banshee KHD down. But we do put it down eventually. You know what? Fine, a kill is a kill. We're then going to have the Iguana and Layla Sharif continue to move up and around. Layla will get into base contact with the objective. She's actually just going to fling it forward so that it's in contact with the Yarn Yarn, and then she'll continue on to try and sort of like hold a position here. But this is all fine, but this is the bit where I will make the next major mistake and my attempt to throw the game, which is that I will go, ha ha ha, let's do some fighting with the Iguana. It's tough and durable. And I climb it onto this rooftop. Now, there are like 3 reasons why this is a mistake. The first is that I just, at this point, forget that I have white noise. There is a Hetkari over here. I know I am taking an arrow from the Hetkari. I'm like, you know what? It's fine. The Iguana is durable. The Hetkari will just be firing back double action round. No big deal. I don't even really have the orders anyway for Lashmir through a white noise. In fact, I don't. But I shouldn't really be doing this without using one of my best tools for dealing with the Hetkari. The second reason why this is a mistake is that I just have kind of a bad habit in terms of object permanence of going, aha, model here and model here. First model in front of second model, therefore block line of sight, which completely ignores the fact that the Iguana is a tag and therefore very tall. And so I commit to this movement, and then Cameron goes, I think I've also got a shot with the Pathfinder, and I go, you do. Crap. And the Hatkari puts a wound on the Iguana, and the Pathfinder flash pulses and stuns it, which means that I have just kind of fed the Iguana into the meat grinder, and that's basically the kind of end of the turn. All of the remaining stuff that Layla Sharif does, moving up and around, getting the B-Pong forward, and then trying to do some hacking on the Hetkari, ultimately unsuccessfully. She does Carbonite it, but Carboniting it only gives the Sekban time to actually make the recovery run on the Azrael. It will reset out of the Carbonite as an ARO. Ultimately, it's like, really kind of screwed the pooch on all of this one, didn't I? And so at the end of my turn here, we can see the Janbazan is taking its face-to-face rolls, the Iguana is trapped on the rooftop. Fortunately, stunned will clear, but this is a turn in which the Hetkari gets to just kind of go ham. And you never really want to be able, like, for those to be a thing. We do have Layla Sharif on ground level over here, but she is a solvable problem. The Crux Knight is finally going to move out, and that fire team is going to do 2 things that prove its value. The first is that we're going to get some disco down. Disco has very forgiving range bands, and the Disco Ball Fennec is going to get a nice clean line up this line here and drop a Disco Baller down that will block off this zone here. What that will do is keep the Azrael out of this particular fight. It will let the Hetkari move up and around nice and freely, and it will also mean that the Crux Knight can get across this gap, come up and around here, and absolutely execute Layla Sharif. Now, should Layla Sharif have been there? Frankly, no. She should probably have been something like next to this here where the Yarn Yarn is. She should probably have been there, right? She's a 6th Sense hacker that can use Carbonite. She would have been excellent just contributing zone of control arrows in that space. Instead, she was in a position where she could be shot and died, mostly because I had all of these grand plans with the Iguana and wasted orders on it, and then just got it stunned for no reason. With Layla out of action, the Hetkari can just go ahead and do Hetkari things. Now, it is going to take quite a bit of time. In terms of engagements that will be levied against this Griffin, we're going to see the Fwereback against this Iguana, sorry. We're going to see the Griffin stand up, move up and around, and take multiple gunfights. And this is sort of like going to use the first group's orders to deal with things. The Crux Knight came up around, did some stuff. Cool, we've got some orders spare. The Griffin tees up on the Iguana and actually does ample work. It takes most of the remaining Group 1 orders to deal with the Iguana, but deal with the Iguana it does with a little asterisk. The ejection system, the no wound incapacitation, the extra orders, etc., even with a 2+1 dice Fwereback with good ballistic skill, it is very difficult to put the Iguana to dead, and in fact the Iguana operator is going to survive. There will be some dodges, it'll make some back and forth, eventually it's going to end up basically sitting here in an eclipse zone with nothing that can dig it out. I do still have a hacker left, Lashmi is not in a position where the Hetkari can go down, and that means that at least all of this space for now, and especially the objective over here, is not really within the Hetkari striking distance. This is not a repeater that can be turned off by the Pathfinder. It cannot just tank its way through all of its saves again and put another, like deal with another repeater using its deactivator. This is a repeater on an actual model, and now it's in Eclipse Smoke. So the Iguana is bailing me out of the worst of the outcomes for this turn, but the Hetkari is still going to do Hetkari things. Over the course of multiple orders, it's going to engage and kill the Janbazan, engage and kill the killer hacker Al-Hawa, and after a couple of face-to-face rolls in kind of awkward range because there are a bunch of zero visibility zones here, and so it can really only kind of get line of sight from certain positions, is also going to not kill, but suppress the Azrael. Now, it's going to take most of the remaining orders in that combat group, but that is 2 very clean kills. And the attrition lead that I'm trying to build is slowly beginning to slip away from me. However, once again, all of this material that I've thrown out, the fact that there are still more mines than God in this space, and all of the mines in and around this building have not been cleared. In fact, there are more mines over here now than there were last turn. Means that as much damage as Kestrel is doing, they are not quite able to convert that into scenario points. And so at the end of this round, we can see the beginning of my final turn here. Once again, we have the Yan Yan still in suppressive fire, still sitting prone on this objective, and this B-Pong controlled by this Yan Yan, which puts me up to 3 points. And that is starting to get into the points level where I can not just have a good chance of winning on the last turn, but maybe even score a major win, which is not easy to do in B-Pong from first. Now, there are some fairly major obstacles for me to contend with. Technically speaking, if I do nothing, I could theoretically win this game comfortably on the trot, because I am at least in position on the objectives that I need to be. I have a Yan Yan on this objective, I have a Yan Yan on the B-Pong itself. If nothing else changes, I'll win comfortably. However, that's not how this works. Kestrel is going to have an entire round of trying to annihilate all of these things, and having the last player option be able to just get into base contact with this Pong and fling it back towards my deployment zone, which one order, it has not been moved that far forward. All it will take is one specialist action to get it onto my half of the table. That secures a lot of potential points. On top of that, I am contending with this Griffin here, which is still linked and has good lines of sight, and the Hetkari is prone here in suppressive fire. One thing is going to play reasonably well into my hands this turn, and that is that I will finally remember that I put white noise in this list for a reason. And so as the eclipse from the ejection system clears at the beginning of my turn, Lashmi will remember her damn job and use the repeater from the iguana to put an eclipse zone down here, which the iguana is going to crawl into, stand up, and then reap a merry hell, because all of these 2 Overwatch pieces, the very high value Hetkari and the very high value Griffin, are MSV and marksmanship pieces, and I am going to put them in the dirt. Now, it's going to take some effort. I'm going to have to I'm going to have to carbonite the Hetkari, put it immobilized so that I can actually just kill the damn thing, because if I do not immobilize it, it will just respond with suppressive fire, and spoiler alert, even an iguana firing through an albedo zone, I do not trust to win a face-to-face roll against a suppressive Hetkari. But I brick it with carbonite, I spool up with the HMG, get at 0 range bands, have the Hetkari out of cover, and after 2 orders of shooting, I put the Hetkari down. We then turn our attention to the Griffin, and after 1 face-to-face roll, we do a wound to it, and it very sensibly drops prone. That's really good. From there, we're able to move the operator down this building into base contact with the objective and pop it into suppressive fire. Now, that's pretty much everything that we can feasibly do this turn, but I am hoping that it's going to be enough. The NCO order will be used to move the Azrael up and around to a more aggressive position for ARO pieces, and then Lashmi will just be moving around trying to do things and place. She's going to try to contribute further hacking, and in fact, on the very last order of the game, I use my last of my game. I use the last command token I have to convert the Yan Yan over here's irregular order regular, and she actually just takes a Hail Mary shot and also carbonites the Crux Knight over here. That puts me in a very nice position and means that Cam has a fair bit of work to do going into his final turn. So here is the puzzle that he is kind of facing. There are a lot of mines in this position still. There is a suppressive fire in no wound in cap heavy infantry repeater in base contact with the objective, and a Yan Yan with +4 armor. I still have a Whip 14 hacker, and she is over here kind of well out of possible danger zone of anything that might go and kill her if Cam wants to be able to make a credible run onto the objective. And I have a linked, very dangerous heavy infantry Feuerback, thoroughly occupying the objective line of sight as well. Also, finally, casualties are beginning to tell on the Kestrel side of the field. The Pathfinder is down, the Hetkari is down, other things are wounded, and the Crux Knight is immobilized, meaning we are finally starting to see a little bit of difficulty in the order pools and some limitations in the order pools. How Cam is going to try and solve this is basically a couple of different things. The first thing he will try and do is move the Griffin and Bipandra up and around. Actually, sorry, the very first thing that he will do is activate this Jackal and go for a jump. It jumps down here, it detonates 3 of the mines, it actually passes all 3 of the saves, and survives the suppressive fire from the Iguana, but the chain rifle from the Yan Yan puts it down, and then we both look and go, oh, it's on the side of the Azrael as well, and it dies. However, that detonates 3 of the 4 mines that are watching this space, which opens up just a few options. We then have the Griffin and Bipandra try and move up and around, but at this point, the hacking area, this doorway that they're going to try and use to get down, is just inside hacking area, and this all turns kind of awkward kind of quickly. There is no easy way, it's basically not possible for them to come around a corner and get line of sight to the suppressive fire Iguana operator without walking through the repeater area. And after an entire game of my hacking being very subpar in terms of rolls, finally the Griffin starts to stick. It runs into Carbonite, it doesn't go any further. And while Bipandra herself does actually clear out and kill the Yan Yan, it's not going to get any further. Now, there is one ace still up Cam's sleeve, and that is he still has his speedball, and he has to make the call at this point. What does he use the speedball on? He could use it on the Griffin, or he could use it on the Crux Knight, and I think correctly he elects to use it on the Crux Knight. Even though the Crux Knight is a little bit further away, it is unwounded. It natively has stealth, and there is a Fennec Fusilier right next to it who in one order can just get it free. So the speedball lands, the Crux Knight has its immobilized state cleared, and it moves up and around. Thanks to stealth, because I've gone and gotten Layla Sharif killed, it's able to just sneaky move. None of this would be possible if I still had Layla, because she would be carbonating it the entire time because she has combat instinct. But eventually, on the second last order, I want to say, of the game, the Crux Knight comes up and around into base contact with the objective. Now, this is a bit of a Hail Mary. What Cam is going to do is he's going to use the specialist ability to flick the beacon. He's going to flick it 4 inches backwards, land it over here, and get it onto my half of the table. That is going to secure him 2 points. But what he's really hoping is that the Crux Knight survives, and there's just a lot in the way of the Crux Knight for it to try and survive. It has to wear 1 mine and suppressive fire from the Iguana operator and a hacking arrow, and ultimately it is not going to survive all of that. It's going to end up both bricked and dead, and there are not sufficient orders to get it or anything else onto the B-Pong to secure any more points. Cam is also not quite in a position where he can get to any of the side objectives, which means when this turn ends, the score is as follows. Cam has 2 points for getting the B-Pong into my half of the table. I have the 3 points that I scored previously, plus 1 point for securing the HVT, plus 1 point for still having the Yan Yan down on this objective here, which means that despite everything, QK against Kestrel has managed to pull a 5-2 win. Now, yes, this was against a very new player, an extremely promising player playing an extremely solidly built list, but nevertheless a new player. Cam will almost certainly develop a bit more in the way of lethal-minded thinking, ruthlessness, and aggression. I certainly expect, as he and I play more, as he plays other people in the community, he's going to hone that particular blade, and we will start seeing him do very well in games very quickly. I mean, hell, he did very well in this game. But with the caveat that, yes, this was a game against a slightly newer player, how did the Iguana perform? How did QK perform? Overall, I'm really happy with both, actually. The Iguana did absolute work turn on turn. It laid a ton of mines. Never got to take a face-to-face roll, not one face-to-face roll with its primary gun in its tag form, but its resiliency, coupled with the fact that it is a repeater, genuinely bailed me out of the game in the final turn. Yes, it was Lashmi, who was a hacking device plus, who was able to throw up white noise. That would be decisive and is what I would allow the Iguana operator to win all of those face-to-face rolls, plus some hacking support from Carbonite to immobilize the Hetkari. But none of that would have been remotely possible in the game state as it was if it weren't for the fact that the iguana is a repeater in both of its forms, in heavy infantry form in addition to tag form. That's just really cool and really powerful. We kind of always knew, right? Like tag with repeater was the selling point of the iguana before. But prior to the update, that repeater disappeared when it ejected the heavy infantryman. Now it is effectively 5 wounds, 4 plus no wounding cap, of durable repeater, and it's so difficult to get through all of it in one turn because once you do that third wound, or in this case, once you do that fourth wound and trigger no wounding cap and transmutation in the same order, it puts that eclipse zone down over the ejecting heavy infantry, which means that unless you've got some very specific follow-up, i.e. basically exactly melee, you're not finishing the tag off. And that makes it the stickiest repeater in the entire game. You basically have to think about isolation if you want to turn off the repeater threat that the tag poses. Now, you can still possess it. Lord knows I've had a game in the past where I possessed an iguana and then used the repeater to get hacking kills. Very funny and very amusing, by the way. So it is absolutely not immune to countermeasures, but just a great package, even in a game where it never really got to fire off the HMG until it was in heavy infantry form. The fact that it was dangerous even in heavy infantry form, it's ballistic skill 13, it's burst 4, it's also got good close range weapons. Just a great package, and Qapu Khalqi generally felt like a really, really good home for it. I was really happy with how much other stuff I had going on in this list. I liked the fact that I had two really solid Haris teams, both of which offered different support. I like the fact that I have both smoke shooting and white noise shooting in the same list, and these are dangerous guns as well. Yes, the Jambazan is only ballistic skill 12, but it's firing 5 dice down range, and the Azrael especially is very dangerous. The Iguana is perfectly serviceable. There is a really nice hacking mix. I like this list a lot. I have no idea what I'd pair it with, but in terms of getting my first game of Qapu Khalqi in N5, very, very happy with the list. Can recommend it, with the caveat that there are a lot of different 22, 23 point pieces that you could easily swap out if there's something else in the faction that you personally liked. Now, quick channel plug to close out. Just as a reminder, if you want to support the channel, you can hit like and subscribe on YouTube, all of that usual stuff, leave a comment, etc. You can support the channel via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below, or by becoming a channel member on YouTube. We have Infinity content basically once a week, very occasionally more, and so that means I very much that you've enjoyed this video this week. I'll be back next week with more Infinity content. Have yourselves a good week, and I'll see you next time.